Okay, so the NFL draft, the first round of the 2025 NFL draft just concluded right now. It is midnight for me, and I have some initial thoughts. I took notes on each player, and basically, as the draft went on, one pro and one con. So I'm going to go through these rapid fire, all 32 teams, NFL draft, and here we go. The first pick in the draft was no surprise to anybody. We have Cam Ward at number one. I think this is a good pick for Tennessee. He is the type of player, he reminds me, he has Mahomes-esque qualities, but I will give a little bit more of a hampered expectation and say that right now he reminds me a little bit more of Jordan Love. Now, he still has a ways to go. He definitely has the experience coming out of college. He can make a lot of off-schedule throws. He's been really good at engineering comebacks in college, and he's got great personality traits. He has great intangibles, and I think he can handle the pressure that's going to come along with being a guy who at number one is going to be expected to save a franchise. The downside to him, to me, is the same thing that makes him great. He tends to force throws a lot, and I think that a lot of those plays that he made in college, they're going to be hard to make in the NFL. A lot of things you saw with Caleb Williams, who I think has a little bit more talent coming out of college, you see in him where he's going to make throws that are going to frustrate you, but I think he's going to make a lot of wow plays at the same time. But is the rest of the team going to be able to make up for that? And he's not going to be expected to produce and carry right away. Number two, we had our first trade in the draft. The Cleveland Browns traded down to 5, and then the Jaguars traded up to pick one of my favorite prospects in the draft. That was Travis Hunter. I think it goes without any introduction. He is a generational type of player because he was elite on both sides of the ball in college. So what you're getting with him is, to me, a top 10 talent at both positions. But the questions that are going to remain with him is, where are they going to utilize him? A lot of whispers out of it is saying that he's going to start on offense and then kind of spell on defense. I think offensively, he's got really good ball skills and intangibles. His catch radius, his ability to pluck the ball in traffic are second to none. He was great at that in college, but his route tree needs work. He needs to define his routes and understand how to work in NFL concepts. I think he should be fine if they start him on offense so he can learn the intricacies of an NFL playbook, which is going to be a lot more than what he learned coming out of Colorado. Defensively, I think he can start and play right away, but I think he's going to be a guy that you're going to spell and have come in. He's almost a plug and play talent on defense. So I think they've at least, I don't think he's going to be a bust. I think on one side of the ball or the other, if they make him concentrate on one, he should be fine. Number three, we have my New York Giants. I'm going to try to keep my biases out of this, but we have Abdul Carter coming out of Penn State. This guy is a generational defensive type of talent coming out of college. He is a phenomenal player, very comparable to like a Micah Parsons or even a Von Miller. Now, I hate using those names because those are huge brand names and he still has to do it in the NFL. But that potential, that athleticism, that length, that ability to get to the quarterback, it's all there. And you pair that with the fact that he's got Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau to kind of teach him the ropes. He's not going to be the guy. He's going to be one of possibly 3 guys, which makes for a really dangerous pass rush. The real only issue coming out is his health. It came out right before the draft that he has a foot injury that may be lingering, and it remains to be seen if he's going to get surgery. But I think if he stays healthy, this guy is going to be a player in the National Football League. At number 4, we have tackle Will Campbell coming out of LSU. This guy was a stud at LSU. He was one of the best, if not the best lineman in college football. Tremendous player with a lot of skills, great powerful hands. Don't be weird, but he has very powerful hands and a good strike when he plays. The biggest thing that I see coming out of him, and I think every analyst said the same thing, his arm length, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything in the NFL. Just when they evaluate players, a lot of times they look for really long arms. He doesn't have them. That doesn't mean that he can't play in the NFL, but that's his biggest downside coming out. At number 5, we have the Cleveland Browns trading down from with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They took Mason Graham out of Michigan. This guy is a stud as well. Consensus, every single draft guru I saw had him as a top 5 pick. Really good player. He's a disruptive force in the middle of the football field. Very comparable to my own New York Giants Dexter Lawrence. He has that ability to really push the pile forward and create havoc in the middle. And that is something that in a lot of defenses, when you have that guy in the middle, it is a very rough thing to defend against. Downside for him, his pass rush numbers weren't the best coming out of college. His career high in sacks was 3.5 sacks. So as an interior lineman, you're not really expected to do that, but that's the biggest thing that I see as a downside coming out of him so far. Cleveland didn't have a great pass rush from the interior, so I think he's going to really help them right away. At number 6, we have a lot of people's favorite dark horse. Can't really be a dark horse in the top 10. We have Ashton Jeanty coming out of Boise State. Watched him play a lot in that Mountain West Conference, and again against Penn State and in Oregon, he held his own. This guy has one of the best contact balances, which means when he gets hit, he does not go down easily. He's able to kind of roll off of hits and continue his runs. The other thing about him is he has great breakaway speed. He can actually run away from a lot of players. I saw in the NFL draft analysis that they were comparing him to an Emmitt Smith. I get what they're saying. It's a very apt comparison because this guy has contact balance very similar to if you watch old Emmitt highlights. Emmitt didn't go down easily. But the difference between him and Emmitt is he's faster than Emmitt Smith was. Emmitt didn't run away from players as much, but he was able to just continue his runs, where Ashton Jeanty is a home run threat. Biggest downside for him, it is the Raiders, but it has a new regime with Pete Carroll, who loves to have that kind of ground and pound offense to round out. Think Marshawn Lynch. That was the guy that he wanted, and I think they got their guy. Number 7, we have the New York Jets with Armand Membu coming out of Missouri. This guy is a plug-and-play, widely considered the second best tackle coming out. A lot of people had him at 1, but he is a guy that I think is going to play and start right away for the New York Jets, and I don't really see a downside to that. The downside is, I hate to say this, but it is the New York Jets. They basically gave the keys to Justin Fields already, and with the type of player that he is, he likes to scramble around a lot. Is he going to be able to keep up with the kind of player that Justin Fields is? Because at Missouri, he didn't have that type of offense. I also will say this, the Jets have taken a ton of offensive tackles in the last decade or so, and most of them haven't really panned out. I thought they were going to go with a playmaker type of player. I thought maybe Tyler Warren coming out of Penn State, who didn't go until much later in the draft, but that's the pick they had. I think he's got potential to be a good player. At number 8, the Carolina Panthers took wide receiver Tetorio McMillan. I can't say his name. I'm sorry about that. I call him T-Mac. This guy was a playmaker at Arizona. He was, especially when Fafito was there, they threw him the ball a lot, got him a lot of jump balls. He had a high usage rate, and he made a lot of plays. Guy's 6'4", he's 219 pounds. You're in a 4.48 in the 40-yard dash, so he's got that breakaway speed. He's got a high catch radius, so you've got a great talent coming out and being able to help Bryce Young right away, where the Panthers are desperate for a deep threat, a playmaker at the wide receiver position. Biggest question mark for him, he reminds me of Drake London coming out of USC, that same similar type of skill set. But I do think in the NFL where you have to be a complete route runner, not saying he can't do it, but as of now, he's a little bit of a project. And of course, the supporting cast in Carolina isn't the best. This is a team that is trying to get better, did come along at the end of the season, so it remains to be seen. At number 9, the New Orleans Saints took Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, tackle. I was surprised that they took him, to be honest. I thought everybody had them linked to a quarterback, but the Saints played it safe with this. I think they got a player that's much more of a safer play. He's got a very high floor. I think the guy's going to come in. He was a very decorated player at Texas, good player, productive player there as an offensive lineman. Normally, people don't take guards this early, but a lot of players as a downside, a lot of teams had him, gurus had him moving inside to guard. It's very rare that you see a top 10 player being taken as a guard and not a tackle, so I don't know where they're going to use him, but the Saints need some offensive line to fortify that position. Trevor Penning, coming out of my alma mater, Northern Iowa, they've kind of just given up on him. He didn't really pan out for them, so they're looking for someone to replace him. They also had Ryan Ramczyk retire recently, so they needed a tackle, and they got one. It's remained to be seen if he's going to be productive, but coming out of Texas, this guy was a really good. At number 10, the Chicago Bears, who were largely linked to trading up to get Ashton Jeanty. It just didn't pan out for them, but they ended up taking tight end Colston Loveland out of Michigan. This was a guy that was very productive, one of Jim Harbaugh's favorite players when he was there. He's a good blocker, very solid, dependable pass catcher, and I think he's going to work well for them. The reason I think that the Bears took him, new head coach Ben Johnson coming out of Detroit, they ran a ton of 12 personnel, meaning 2 tight ends on the field a lot. So they have Cole Kmet. They wanted another guy in there so they could utilize them a ton. So it makes sense for them to take him. I think coming out of Michigan, you have a veteran guy who's pretty much a safe pick. As a player, I don't really think he has a downside. He kind of is what he is. It just remains to be seen how he's going to be utilized. Is he going to be the number 1 or the number 2 guy in Chicago? At number 11, you have the San Francisco 49ers taking Michael Williams out of Georgia. It's no secret that the 49ers needed to bring in someone on the defensive side of the ball. They got rid of Leonard Floyd, Javon Hargrave, and Malik Collins. They got rid of a lot of those guys up front, so they needed a guy that was going to come in. They think immediately that he should be able to contribute in the run game at the very least. His pass rushing, his numbers weren't that good, so I think they're going to have to develop him on that side of the ball, which is the downside. But I think immediately he should be able to help them on the defensive side of the ball, especially against the run. At number 12, Dallas Cowboys took Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama. Losing Zach Martin, who's going to be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. He retired recently. They needed a guard to bring in Michigan. This guy, a lot of Alabama guards historically and himself included, are really, really stout run blockers. And Dallas likes to run the football. So I think he's going to be right there in the mix to play right away. The biggest thing with him, just like most Alabama guards, against the pass and in space, they kind of tend to struggle a little bit. And just looking at his build and his skill set, it remains to be seen if he's going to be able to translate those skills as a pass blocker to the NFL. But at the very least, I think they've got a very big, strong, physical run blocker that's going to be there to help them right away. So at 13, the Miami Dolphins took Kenneth Grant coming out of Michigan. He is another big space-eating defensive tackle who the Dolphins have a ton of pass rush options already, but they really were starving for someone who was going to eat up space and be able to absorb blocks and disrupt in the middle. I think this guy's got the potential to do that. He was also compared to Dexter Lawrence as well. I can see the similarities watching him at Michigan. Downside to this, in the Dolphins sense, they have glaring needs at a lot of other positions that I don't think they can take them all right away. I saw Will Johnson coming out of Michigan also sitting on the board, which I thought they would take. They ended up taking Kenneth Grant, who is a really good player. Similar to a lot of these defensive tackle guys, it remains to be seen how their pass rush ability is going to be. But as far as space eating, he's going to come in, he's going to play right away. At number 14, we have one of my favorite players coming out of Penn State, Tyler Warren. He was a guy that they lined up everywhere at Penn State. You saw him taking snaps in the Wildcat. You saw him line up as an inline tight end. You saw him lined up split out wide at the flex position. He's a guy that can do it all. Really, really just a football player. Ability to play the game at a high level at anywhere you put him is going to be an immediate upgrade in the Indianapolis Colts offense. The biggest downside of them so far is, are the Colts going to be able to utilize his skill set? Are they just going to line him up as a tight end? Steichen, the Colts head coach, has been able to do that other places, but so far in Indianapolis, it hasn't really worked out as well. And are they going to be able to get the ball to him and move him around and see if he's going to be productive? It remains to be seen with them, but this was a guy that I think that he's just going to be a player right away. I really, really like. At number 15, we have the first pick coming from the Atlanta Falcons. I thought they had a really good draft at immediately upgrading their pass rush, and this is no exception in Jalen Walker coming out of Georgia. This guy was a dog at Georgia. He has an ability to get to the passer that is one of the best coming out of this draft. He's a top talent, and they were able to get him at 15. I think he's going to help them right away. The biggest issue with him, and it's been said over and over again, he's considered being undersized. I believe he's about 6'1", 240 pounds, which is a smaller player, but that doesn't mean anything in the NFL. Some players are oversized and can't play, and some players are undersized, but that's the biggest downside coming from him. I think they got a really, really good player in him. This is the type of guy that at Georgia was a jack of all trades. They lined him up everywhere. I even saw him playing out in space as like a slot cover guy. So he's a guy that with Raheem Morris, who's the defensive background, they should be able to use him. I like this pick a lot. At number 16, we have defensive tackle Walter Nolan coming out of Ole Miss. This is another pick that I really like. This is a guy that can get to the quarterback even at Ole Miss. He led the nation in sacks last year as a defensive tackle. So out of that position, really, really good ability to the quarterback. The other upside with him is he's got a ton of veteran guys in front of him. They're not necessarily going to need him to be the guy right away, but as part of a rotation to eventually take the reins, I think this is a guy that's a great pick for them. They're picking from a position of depth already, and they've got a veteran leader in front of him like Calais Campbell, who is older than me. At number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals took Shamar Stewart, the defensive, well, he's an edge rusher out of Texas A&M. This was one of the better talents in the draft. And considering the Trey Hendrickson situation they have kind of brewing where he's asking to be let out, they like to rotate a lot of guys in this situation or in their defensive line at Cincy. This is a guy that is a ton of talent. The ability is there. The biggest downside with him was his numbers were not that great at A&M. That was the only thing. Everything that you saw, this ability didn't really translate to these crazy numbers at A&M. He had 4.5 sacks in 3 seasons at A&M, which coming from an edge rusher are not the best numbers. So it remains to be seen if they can harness those skills to get that athleticism, which is off the charts, into production in Cincinnati. Number 18, Seattle Seahawks took Gray Zabel coming out of a school that owns mine, North Dakota State. Zabel's a guy that North Dakota State is a school that really knows how to produce offensive linemen. This guy went to the Senior Bowl and more than held his own, really, really increased his draft stock. He played tackle coming out of North Dakota State, but I think they have him clicking in on the Seahawks or in the NFL to guard. It just remains to be seen where they're going to play him, but he's the type of player that I think he has a future in the NFL. It just remains to be seen where they're going to play him, but a relatively safe pick. I think he's going to be. The biggest downside to him is, of course, the FCS competition is not the same as you're going to see in the FBS or of course in the NFL. But like I said, he did play really well in the Senior Bowl, which made his draft stock shoot up through the charts, and he ended up getting taken at 18. I think it's a good pick. The Seattle Seahawks need offensive linemen. At number 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took Emeka Egbuka coming out of Ohio State. Ohio State is just runs off, rattles off great receivers. He's another one that they've got coming out. This was a guy that made a ton of plays for them, has great speed and ability to make plays. You saw it all over the season last year, all the way into the national championship. This is a guy that I think is a really good receiver. Biggest thing for me is I was surprised that he got taken by Tampa Bay here. I know Chris Godwin got hurt, so they do need a guy that can kind of step in, but he's going to come back for all intents and purposes. And you already have Mike Evans. I just thought the Bucs had bigger needs at other positions, but I don't think they're really going to strike out here. I mean, you got Baker Mayfield, who's really come along, obviously throwing him the ball, and a lot of other guys to learn from. This is a guy that I think will be a player at the very least is going to be somewhat productive in his rookie season and then take the reins going forward for Tampa Bay. At number 20, we have an unreal embarrassment of riches pick, but the Broncos took Jahdae Barron coming out of Texas. This is a guy that the NFL, you need guys that can make plays in space, and he did that in spades at Texas. He has really good ball skills, really good ability to hunt the football, really good ability to cover people in space. He played everywhere at Texas. They lined him up all over the place, and he's the type of guy that in the league will become like a joker type of player, meaning they move him around in different places. I don't really have anything bad to say about this pick, especially where they took him in the value. The only thing I think is Denver had other needs that were more pressing, but I think this was a situation where they said, we've got a guy we know is going to play right away. Instead of gambling on someone that we weren't sure about, let's take a sure thing. They did, and they have, which has arguably become one of the best secondaries in the NFL in Denver. This is a player here that they got at 20, and I think he was an absolute steal. Last year, I said the same thing about Cooper DeJean coming out of Philly. At number 24, we have defensive tackle Derek Harmon coming out of Oregon. I think the Steelers took him mainly because you've got Hayward or Cameron Hayward, who is aging. I think he's 36 at this point in his career. They need somebody to kind of fortify that defensive line. And I can completely understand why they took him. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to play right away for them. I don't dislike that pick for that reason. The downside for this was the Steelers are crying for a quarterback, and I really thought they were going to end up taking Shedeur Sanders. All of the whispers coming out of the Pittsburgh beat writers that I follow and, and all the NFL people was that they really like Sanders. They were going to take him. I saw Adam Schefter come out and say they're going to take Sanders. They just didn't. I guess they just really didn't like them as much as people thought. So they have needs bigger than that, but I still don't dislike the pick. You're going to hear a lot of those things coming out for these next couple of picks. So at 22, the Chargers took Omarion Hampton, running back, North Carolina. This guy is a big, physical running back. He may not be as elusive as an Ashton Dainty, but people loved him coming out of North Carolina. He's another one who's a big, powerful runner. You know, Jim Harbaugh loves to pound the football. He loves to run the ball. It's a fit position for them. I definitely think that the pick is a good pick for them. I think this is just the way that the draft board ended with them. I don't think they wanted to reach for another person because they definitely had bigger needs than him, which is the biggest downside. But I think they just like the value at the pick. When you're getting those late first round picks, you're looking for a guy who can contribute and play right away. And you don't want to strike out on those guys. So I think that's kind of what they did. They do have glaring needs at other positions. The Chargers are an incomplete team, but I think they kind of realized the team is a project. So they wanted a guy who was going to be more of a sure thing. They did sign Najee Harris in the offseason, who is a very similar player to him. Coming out of Bama, Najee Harris was similar to him, but they got another one. I don't necessarily dislike the pick. I do think they would have reached going for any of those positions in need, but what was on the board. So number 23, we have Matthew Golden coming out of Texas. I think everybody probably knows by now. This guy is an absolute blur. I think he ran a 4.29 running at the 40 in the combine. He is really, really fast. They are really needing someone on this Packers offense who can take the lid off a defense, and Golden does that in spades, especially having Christian Watson go down. He tore his knee. You don't know when he's going to come back for them. The biggest issue for me with this pick is that I don't necessarily view him as a number one receiver, and when you're drafting receivers in the first round, that's what you're looking for. But he's definitely a player that can be a sum of parts in Green Bay. I think maybe they're thinking Christian Watson coming back will be that guy, but can he be that number one receiver that you expect out of a first round draft pick? I haven't seen that so far, but you can't teach speed like that. Number 24, we have guard Donovan Jackson coming out of Ohio State, and this was a pick that it's definitely a position of need. They needed this player. The Vikings in the playoffs, you saw the Sam Darnold, everybody kind of gave him the biggest issues or crap for that, but they give up 9 sacks in that game, and they really needed to address. They signed a ton of free agents. I think they just needed another player to bring in here who can play right away, and that's what they were looking for with him. The biggest issue with me is I don't know necessarily he is ready to play right away. I'm not saying that he isn't a talent, but from what they have and what he is, I didn't think that he was like an immediate plug and play starter. He's definitely a guy that can unleash his potential. I don't know how long it's going to take for him so that they can say he is our guy and he is ready to play, but that's the type of stuff that you're looking at when you have a position of need and you're sitting at the bottom of the first round on a team like Minnesota, which has a ton of weapons around, and they needed a lineman more than anything. Okay, we've got another New York Giants thing. Coming into this draft, talking on the Twitch stream to a lot of people, thought that the Steelers would take him at 21. And then my next guess was that the Giants were going to take or trade up to get a guy, which I thought was Shedeur Sanders. But recently, in the last probably 12 to 14 hours, I started reading a lot of Giants beat writers that I follow. And a lot of them said that they had an interview with Shedeur Sanders, the Giants did, where Dable and him didn't quite get along. So I think that was kind of the catalyst for this. They really, really liked Dart coming out of Ole Miss. And just to talk about him as a player, I think he's got a tremendous talent. He's got great arm strength. He throws with great touch, especially on his deep balls. And he also has good size and decent athletic ability. He did show the ability to move around in the pocket a lot. He's the type of player that when you have design read type of quarterback throws, that's his niche. That's where he excels. When he sees that one-on-one and a player that is able to create some sort of separation, he's going to take that shot. And a lot of times at Ole Miss, he did succeed. Being perfectly honest, the downside for him is the same thing I said about a lot of Ole Miss quarterbacks in this Lane Kiffin system. I'm not talking about Eli Manning, of course. I'm talking more about the modern day ones. His anticipation in the pocket isn't the best. Lane Kiffin ran a very quarterback friendly system that is designed to give quarterbacks a lot of open windows and throws where you're not having to throw with anticipation. And also his processor, meaning his ability to make things happen or read and diagnose defenses when they start throwing curveballs at him. I saw multiple times last year, namely in the game against Florida and a couple of other ones where he started to capitulate a little bit, but we're going to see if Brian Dable can kind of coach that out on him. Josh Allen coming out was obviously a better talent than him, but that was my biggest issue with him was his ability to process and read defenses. So we don't know how that's going to work out. I like the pick, especially because he doesn't have to play right away. You know, Russell Wilson is a starter and Jameis Winston is the backup. So you're not looking to get him to play probably not even just this year, maybe not even next year, but it could be somewhere in the middle of next year or the year later. So he's got his ability to sit and learn, which I think is a great thing for NFL quarterbacks to not be expected to come in right away and play. So for that reason, I like the pick. I do think the Giants gave up a little bit, but this is their guy. So they wanted to do it. And the other thing with them is, will this regime be there next year? We don't know. The Giants come out and throw another stinker. They might fire everybody, and then you're starting from zero again. At number 26, we have the Falcons again with a great pick. I love this guy coming out of Tennessee. James Pierce is an edge rusher. His ability to make plays and get to the quarterback at Tennessee, he was really, really good for them. Got a great ability to make plays. He's 6'5". He's about 250 pounds. He ran a 4.4, and his ability to get off the edge was unbelievable. The Falcons ended up trading up to get him, and I said, wow, they really just went from having a position of need to filling that position right away with him and the other first round pick they took at 15. I think the only downside to him so far, even though he's 6'5", 250, if you look at his build, he's very wiry. They're going to have to add some muscle to him. Is he going to be able to uphold that same kind of production and strength against NFL offensive tackles who were a lot bigger and a lot stronger than even the guys in the SEC? At 27, Malachi Starks coming out of Georgia. He was a defensive back for them. Really, really good, talented player, and you're pairing him with one of the most talented safeties in the NFL in Kyle Hamilton. I really like this pick a lot. His ability, his athletic ability are off the charts. This guy is a player at Georgia, and I think he's going into a situation where you know how the Ravens get down on defense. Biggest downside for him, the reason he was available so late was because he didn't have the best season at Georgia. But I think for where you took him and the value, that's a chance that you're willing to take. At number 28, we have Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle, come out of Ohio State. They needed a guy on the interior of that defensive line. They had a ton of injuries, so they do need depth. The Lions are a team that there's not a lot of holes in that team right now. They've got a really, really good nucleus on that football team. I thought they could have taken an edge rusher, but they didn't. Losing Aiden Hutchinson last year to that gruesome injury, that was a position that they really, really needed going forward, and they didn't take one. But as far as the 28 pick and taking them, I think that this is a guy that's going to play right away, and you can't fault teams for doing that, especially when you're talking about the late part of the first round where you have teams that are already built to be contenders and they're not necessarily looking for a guy to come in and be the guy. This is a good. Number 29, you have Josh Connerly coming out of Oregon. Everybody knows how great of an offseason and last season that the Washington Commanders did have with Jaden Daniels. They're looking to build an offensive line. This was a position that they needed to have, and I think they addressed it. They've brought in a ton of guys in the last 2 seasons that are already able to play at different positions. So the biggest question mark for me is they just signed Laramie Tunsil, who is their He's going to start at left guard, so I don't know where they're going to put him. Maybe they click him to right tackle or they move him inside to guard. But at the bottom of the first round, taking a guy like this, it's a great pick. This is what you're going to see in a lot of these later first picks. I don't think they need him to play right away, which is a good thing. But that's what you're going to see with a lot of these bottom first round guys is positions of need. And are they going to be able to play right away? They're not necessarily needed to. But this is another pick that I like. At number 30, you have Maxwell Hairston, cornerback coming out of Kentucky. The Bills have a good team, but they do need help at the defensive back position. This was a guy that I thought played a lot of zone at Kentucky, which is what Kentucky runs. And the Buffalo Bills run a ton of zone as well. So he fits their scheme. He fits a need. And this is a guy that I think, again, at this pick, it's a great pick. The biggest issue was last year he did have an injury. I think he missed about 4 or 5 games. So is he going to be healthy? And the other thing you saw that he came out of that injury was he kind of whiffed at a lot of tackles. This could be a thing that was just because of the injury, but I think that this was a position of need, probably the best available player on the board for them. So I don't dislike the pick. It's a good pick. Number 31, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm laughing because this drives me insane. The Eagles do this every year. They did it last year with Cooper DeJean, and now they do it again with Jahad Campbell coming out of Alabama. You have got to be kidding me. They just keep picking up really elite defensive players with like injury concerns that they don't necessarily need to play right away. Nakobe Dean was another one for them. They signed Zach Bowen last year like off the street and he ended up being a Pro Bowler, and now they got another guy who's incredibly athletic, physical, dangerous player coming out of Alabama. Look, again, I don't put my biases into stuff like this. This is a really, really good player that they got at the bottom of the first round. That the only reason he was standing there or sitting there was because of injuries. So that's the biggest concern. As this guy gets back healthy, you're on a defense that you can just plug him in, where they've got a ton of talent in all 3 levels of the ball, just like Cooper DeJean. They just keep doing it. Howie Roseman, he deserves a statue in Philadelphia at this point, because you've got to be kidding me. I love the pick. I loved Cooper DeJean last year. You saw what happened with that. And at 32, you have the Kansas City Chiefs. They did flip-flop with Philadelphia to get Josh Simmons, tackle from Ohio State. It's no secret that the Chiefs needed an offensive lineman. They need an offensive tackle badly. They've been really frustrated with the play from a lot of those guys. And this was a person that he's at that part of the round, similar to the pick before them, because of injury. This is a guy that should be their starter as soon as he's healthy. It just remains to be seen when. But other than that, I don't really have an issue with this pick. When you're the Kansas City Chiefs or the Philadelphia Eagles, you have the ability to take flyers on these types of players. And I think that once he gets healthy, he's going to go and he's going to play. And this is a really, really talented player that just has health concerns, which is normal at the end of the first round. He's a top talent that just, this is what happens with a lot of these players. So I do like the pick for them as well. Again, when you're the Chiefs, you're playing with house money when you're your teams at the bottom. I kind of went through those as quickly as possible because I wanted to get all 32 teams in the first round. I don't know what I'm going to do as far as day 2 and then day 3 of the draft, but rapid fire. Let me know what your team was, what you think. Let me know if you like the pick. Let me know if you don't like the pick. As a Giants fan, I said I love the Abdul Carter pick and the Jackson Dart pick. I'm not sure about, if I'm being completely honest. I think he has all the talent in the world, but I just personally have a thing with recent, not Eli Manning, but Ole Miss quarterbacks in that Lane Kiffin system. When I think about guys like Matt Corral, a lot of people were really high on him and I wasn't. Very similar system, and I'm not sure, but I do think he has the potential and he's not playing right away. But I also think they gave up a lot of players when they need the picks, the Giants. So I would give the Abdul Carter pick an A. Like, I don't think that you don't take a guy with that talent at that. And the Jackson Dart pick right now, I'd give a B minus. I still don't hate the pick. I think he's a good player, but I gave you my reasons. So that's going to be the end. I hope you enjoyed.